You know where you are!
This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 481. My name is Brando, and if you are an audio listener of this podcast, I encourage the YouTube version of it because today I am wearing some memorabilia merch from our guest. Thank you, Adam Mars, who's given me the official hell shirt. I got to put this over my face.
No topless starts.
Yeah, no, the official hell shirt with the palm tree red and I don't know if it's yellow and reddish orange, whatever. I'm over describing
It's
it.
the GN'R red and yellow, you know.
Yeah, so the one that you've seen Axl wear during I believe it was in Mexico in
This
20
was in Miami, actually.
Miami. That's it because they met Snoop Dogg. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you get to see that picture of Slash and Duff smiling and Snoop Dogg smiling and Axl not even cracking a grin, like he's wearing that hell shirt. So Adam Mars, designer for Axl Rose, a lot of his recent shirts and other artists like Billie Eilish. And I mean, you gave me your whole resume. Who are some of the other artists that you've been fortunate enough to
Well,
work
yeah,
with?
it got my start working for my friends in this indie SoCal band that are really big called the Growlers, at least within our kind of surf rock community. I did a couple outfits for them for their Halloween concert that they have, or they used to have every year called Beach Goth. And I thought it would be a one-off thing. And then the next year, the singer Brooks Nielsen got me a little drunk and said, "Hey, we're going on tour. You want to make 30 outfits in like a week for us?" And I was like, okay. And then, I said, I'll never do this again. I was vividly remember watching them play in LA, sitting on the side of the stage and just be like, I'm never fucking doing this again. This was a ton of work. And then I got a DM out of the blue one day from Post Malone stylist, Kathy Han. And I didn't know who he was. I thought it might have been like Carl Malone's son or somebody. I was, and then my brother was sitting shotgun with me. We were on the North Shore for a wedding, and we pulled over, and he handed me the phone, and he goes, "This guy's really big." And I was like, "Really?" And I look over, and there's a billion plays of a song, and I was like, "Do I really not know who the next Michael Jackson is?" I'm a rocker guy. I kind of gave up on new hip hop after Tupac and Biggie died. So, but that opened up these crazy doors for me, where overnight went from being Adam Mars, the painter, to Adam Mars, the custom clothing designer of the stars, and rode that all the way through some really amazing artists that let me get away with some cool creative things. And then I found myself with an opportunity to work for Axl Rose.
I think that's so incredible that out of the blue. But you know what? Before we even get to the Post Malone launch, and I appreciate that, it says like Karl Malone's mailbox. Like,
No.
no,
It's Carl Malone's. I thought it was Carl Malone's son or something.
no, I'm making a
It,
terrible joke on
oh,
top of it because he was
the
called the
mailman. Yeah,
mailman,
the
and then
mailman.
like
I
you
get it.
had Post. I mean, I'm wondering. I don't think he's
Those
named
were
it.
the dots I was connecting. I didn't know who he was at the time. And then when I saw a picture, I was like, oh, the guy with all the tattoos on
That
his face. And at the
right.
time, it was a little bit more rare to encounter someone like that in the pop lexicon. And he was going through, the outer rim of the earth with his music at that time. And he was really into wearing he was kind of like the Lady Gaga of hip hop at the time. And I got to make some really wild outfits for him that he would wear as one-offs on stage, and it was just a really fun time to be, creatively inspired and working within a musical arena that wasn't something that I was totally familiar with, and learning about new pop stars as a almost 40-year-old guy.
That's I mean that's insane. Off the air, we were talking a little bit about breakthroughs and to get that right almost out of the gate for a
Yeah.
breakthrough. But before then, because I'm sure you weren't, but you could have been a Chris Cornell impersonator, at least based upon your looks. I haven't heard you sing.
I can't get into his upper octave range. I'm so sorry.
Not many can, if any.
Yeah.
So you said you started out as a painter. How did that start? Because it's funny. My son, Baby Brownstone, his
Yeah.
nickname. He loves to color. I mean, he doesn't know what
Yeah.
he's doing. He just likes to crayon, and we teach him on the paper, not on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, don't eat it. Is that how it started for you? Were you
Yeah.
eating paint or
People
what?
say you come into the world with a silver spoon in your mouth. I like to say I came out of the womb with a handful of crayons, and I was ready to go. So I grew up with very liberal parents. My dad was like a former biker from Venice, California. My mom was a recovering hippie who spent like this latter end of the 60s and the 70s living up off the grid in Humboldt. And so I wasn't really told. My dad just said, if you don't go to jail, that'll make me happy. So that was the bar that I was judged upon growing up. And so when you mentioned your son drawing on the walls, my parents did not say don't draw on the walls. Like my original bedroom, I remember before there was like a remodel. I went to town. I mean, I was Michelangeloing the shit out of those walls, and and they never just told me not to make art. And so when you're getting older and you're kindergarten, like little Timmy's good at karate and little Becky's a ballerina. It was like little Adam Mars is the artist. And I just held on to that title from then on. And like I had a little bit of slippage, I think, in high school because I loved rock and roll. It was really the one art form beyond making drawings and paintings that just had my attention from the minute I woke up and turned on MTV to the minute I went to bed. And I wanted to get involved, as a rock and roller, but my voice just wasn't up to par, and I was getting vocal nodes in the bands that I was playing in. But I thought maybe I could get into the business side of things. And then right around that time in the 2000s, Napster comes out, and the industry just cannibalizes itself. And so I just jumped back into art, and I never looked back. And so that was in my early 20s, and I'm 43 now.
You're a couple years older than me. I'm
Okay.
41,
Okay.
and yeah. So let's see. Look at this. It's just crazy. I love seeing the trajectory of someone around my age and just that's creative. And my wife's a creative. Obviously, I'm a creative, working in radio and doing this podcast. But we got to return the gate that he's coloring on. It's one of those like rented things. You can't color on that. We encourage.
Okay.
I just want to let you know, like everyone know, we encourage all the creativity in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Yeah. There
We
are.
don't like saying no, but it's like. No, we got to give that back, buddy. Please don't do that. Here's some paper, color,
Yeah.
and but I mean, he's not even 2 yet. Once he starts going crazy,
Yeah. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's
that's when you put up the boundaries.
yeah, yeah. Just like why I'm able to record with you now. He's out with my wife. She's a dance teacher for little kids, and I could do this interview. Sometimes he comes here, but then now he started out like a few weeks. He would just be on my chest while I'm interviewing like
Yeah.
Tommy Stinson. But
Wow.
now he loves playing with the faders, so I can't have him just shut off my microphone in the middle of an interview. But I digress. So when you get into the design of it and you started out as a painter, I guess how does that transition go? Or do you find like a company that makes the clothing and you give them a design, or do you get involved in the actual fabric? Like 'cause
You know,
this is a well-made shirt, so I'm just curious
yeah,
how that goes.
I'm like, I'm a perfectionist by nature. I like to say sometimes I can find an imperfection on a gnat. So when it came to making a clothing company, or when I found myself making clothes more than I was making paintings, especially right around the beginning of the pandemic, where I look back and I had been making clothes, I guess, professionally for a few years, I really got into trying to figure out like the best shirt that I could get my hands on, that I could get in bulk, that I could get rather quickly. And so, yeah, I was really investigating different inks and different materials as kind of like a curious scientist. And I was going to YouTube University and learning as much as I could about silk screening. But that really all came about through working for Axl, because for the most part, the musicians that I was working with before were wearing these as one-offs. They weren't circling back to the outfit after they wore it that initial time. So you didn't have to use specific paints and inks that would hold up in a wash cycle.
Mm.
And then, Axl is more of a creature of habit when he's touring. And so these shirts, if they're in the rotation and he likes them, they have to stand up. And I remember vividly, like one of the first shirts that I'd made for him, I kind of knew what I was doing. I tried to make it the best, but I didn't know about heat setting and all these things, and like working with water-based inks and how long you have to cure them. And I got a call from or a text from someone on the team when they were in like Wichita or somewhere in the Midwest or something. And they sent me this picture that the dry cleaners had taken one of his shirt, and it was just a ghost of what it was before. And he's like, any way you can get me another one of these like immediately? Because like we got a show today and the dry cleaners at whatever hotel, they murdered this shirt. So I learned a lot about that, and I really kind of built up a brand and like a business around him as a client, where I felt, now's the time to really invest in silk screening and learning about that process, and buying a curing oven and turning my once painter-based studio into kind of like a t-shirt shop, and then working with outside people to get information on how to make things in mass. But, I was never really making things in such quantities that I wanted that to be my day in and day out of bagging shirts and shipping them out. It was much more of a get the fans and the dedicated people and some of my friends shirts within a limited edition capacity, and make sure that I've got a shirt that doesn't feel like you're wearing steel wool, and and that doesn't shortchange the audience.
And it's true. It's not like I'm here. It's like some sort of paid promotion. It's not. These are really like nice, well-made shirts.
Thank you.
And the other one I got, which is so sadly appropriate.
Appropriate right now, yeah.
The future
will get weird.
I mean, it's already weird. I mean, it's already weird. My wife can't wait to wear this one. We have to.
Yeah, that's the one that like, sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing.
I mean, I know there's good weird, and then there's weird.
Yeah,
where we're at right now.
We're in the we're in the red.
Yeah, we're in the red. I think so. So yeah, let's talk about Axl a little bit. How did that situation pop up? And Slash is the one that's really known for wearing his shirts. So you would have thought that might have been a match made in heaven. So how did Axl came, and then we'll go into like the designs and how we pick those and stuff.
All right. Well, I kind of touched upon how my friends in the band, the Growlers, gave me this opportunity to make some outfits for their tour, which got me on Instagram on the radar of Kathy Han, who was is Post Malone's stylist. That started a couple-year cycle where he was kind of touring nonstop for the Beer Bongs and Bentley and the Hollywood's Bleeding records. And so I was just making clothes for him. And then at some point I started looking around and being like, do I know anybody else who knows somebody else that's really creative and cool? And I could kind of diversify my portfolio just a little bit. And so, not to sound like a douche or whatever, but one of my buddies knew Billie Eilish, and she was at the top of the charts at that time. And I just was like, hey, do you think I could get a contact to her and see how that goes? And I ended up getting in touch with her manager, who was super kind. And within like 10 minutes, he sent me over to Samantha Burkhart, which was her stylist at the time. And she was on tour, and she just said, yeah, like, this is our budget. This is what we got. Can you come up with some stuff? So I got to work with her for a little bit. Just did like a handful of outfits, and some of them got on Saturday Night Live for the first time, which was really cool. And then I started thinking, like, who's someone that I really would like to make clothes for? And I just thought back to, Guns N' Roses, which when I was 7 years old, I was already a huge music fan at that time. My parents, were blasting MTV and force feeding me the Doors and Talking Heads and the Stones. And, they'd seen everybody in the 60s. And so we were a very MTV friendly, music friendly, parental advisory, blah, blah, blah. That sticker didn't mean shit when I was growing up. But Guns N' Roses, for whatever reason, when I saw Sweet Child and Welcome to the Jungle when I was a kid, they really resonated with me as just the coolest thing I'd ever seen. They all looked distinctly awesome. They all had killer fucking names, and they were all probably the best at their craft within the arena that I was absorbing as a non-critical 7-year-old. Like, I was into Michael Jackson, I was into Prince, I was into fucking Poison, I was into whatever. But they became the band that, you hear musicians when they saw Kiss when they were kids. That's what they were for me. They were just superheroes, and they were on MTV so much that and I brought this picture just to like make sense, because I'm not like a huge celebrity, and I don't have platinum records and Grammys as some of your guests do, but I'm more of a fan that paid his dues for many, many years and got an opportunity that just reminded me that life is very special, and that maybe there is a thing called fate, and maybe there is someone named God, out there that's pulling some strings. So this is me when I'm
Mm.
7 or 8 years old, wearing my first Appetite shirt that I got in the back of a heavy metal magazine where my parents probably sent a check for $11. But if you could see all the feet above it, these are my buddies, and they're wearing like He-Man t-shirts and, and Lakers shit. And these were my superheroes. And so from that time forth, they were my band. I branched out and become bigger fans of bands like, I'm still a huge David Bowie fan. He's my favorite musician. But I got into Queens of the Stone Age. I got into the Stooges. I got into, a lot of different bands that were the number ones at certain periods of my life. But Guns was just that through line that kept me grounded and reminding me how special it is to be alive while rock and roll is around, because music has been part of the fabric of human existence for centuries, and music has been around for so long, but really rock and roll starts in the 50s. So it's an art form that's captured the hearts and minds of the world, but it's less than 100 years old. And so we're really experiencing kind of like the tail end of the high renaissance of this art form. And Guns N' Roses was just such an interesting band because they got so big so fast, and they went so wide, and they became so interesting, and there was so much drama and drugs and band members leaving and whatnot, that they were just, they were like a reality TV show and the best band in the fucking world all rolled into one. And they just captured my imagination then. And so when I got around to the point where I was thinking of people that I wanted to work for, I was like, it's got to be Axl. And he's just wears a lot of iconic graphic shirts, the works that, came out in the Illusion tours when he was wearing the Charlie Don't Surf stuff with Charles Manson on it, and like the, Kill Your Idols shirts. Those are just cemented into the fabric of pop culture. And so I thought, I was seeing the shirts that he was wearing on that first Not in This Lifetime tour, and they were rad. Like, they were very like, evocative of BDSM stuff and old, like vintage kind of pornography and war stuff. And they were loud, and they were big graphics, and you could see them from the back of the arena, and you could see them from the front row. And so I just thought, how can I get in there? And at the time, my brother was in this indie horror surf film called Ghost Babe. Shout out to Ghost Babe. And they were filming it in Ohio. And this was when I'm doing shit for Post Malone and Billie Eilish. And I just remember that Braden Bacha, who was the guy who was directing the film and producing it with his wife, his brother was on Axl Rose's team. And so Braden needed some songs that I'd written with my brother for his punk band, DM Tina and the Bumps. And I thought, well, I'll give him these songs, and maybe I'll just be able to ask for a kind favor, and maybe he'll connect me with his brother, and we'll just see how that goes. And so he connected me with his brother, Brant, just through text. And I pitched him on some of the stuff I had done before, and they were so cool, just within, it was like, yeah, this sounds great. We'll send you a box of shirts, and we'll see how it goes and see if Axl likes them. So they're going on this Not in This Lifetime Part 2 kind of tour in the US. And this is in September, I believe, of 2019. And at the time, Post Malone just releases Hollywood's Bleeding. And he's got this sold out arena tour going. And so I'm pumping out shit like all day, working on pants for him for all these tour stops. And then the Billie Eilish thing pops up with that Saturday Night Live. And that's like right in the same time frame. So I'm like, fuck, I need these shirts really bad. I need them really fast, because I like to say, I'm not Chipotle. I can't just throw a bunch of paint on something and make it happen really fast. Like, I'm a very, for better or worse, a way too critical, a way too detail-oriented creative person. And so I'm waiting for these shirts, and I know that, his team, Vanessa and Brant, are putting together all this stuff, and I'm just really garnish. If anything happens on my end, it's just garnish. They all got all these shirts ready to go, ready to rock for this tour. And then within about a couple days of the launch, I get this box of shirts, and I've been looking for these shirts, been waiting for them. I've been communicating with the team, and they're coming, but I'm not getting this box of shirts. And then I go outside one day, and I look on my balcony, and like tucked away behind one of my chairs is a fucking postal box that no one's ever put a UPS box there or whatever. So it could have been there for days, whatever. Get this box out, and there's these 5 gorgeous shirts with like gratuitous thread counts, and they're fucking gorgeous. They're probably like $200 shirts just as blanks. And I get a text also from them going like, hey, can we have these ready before they're playing this secret show at the Palladium? And by the way, do you want to come and be on the guest list? And I'm just like, this little kid is losing his fucking mind. But I'm a professional and I'm focused, and I'm like, yeah, I can get this done. But I don't have much time to put together these ideas. And I had a couple things that I was told as far as cue cards that are references that Axl was into, and it was like very, very quick. But it was like, he's into girls, guns, and war, and something along those lines. And so I'm trying to come up with something visually that will satiate what they want and maybe get on Axl's radar and have him be like, fuck, this is a great shirt. So I had this one idea for Post Malone that he didn't end up wearing, which was this neon woman with this kind of Amsterdam red light district motif. And I was like, that never got worn. That thing is sick. It's in the Guns N' Roses color palette. Like, let me just make this thing. So I made that. And then at the time, Axl was really trolling Trump on Twitter. And like, I was like, all right, maybe if I make something that's kind of tongue in cheek around that, it'll be on his radar and he'll really be stoked about that. And so I made this one that was like Don Corleone, and it said like the real Don, like, because at the time, Trump was being pitched as this mob boss and like this wannabe Don Corleone. And then I made another shirt with this like a bloody peace sign, because Axl, when he's performing, a lot of times he has that thing that's, evocative of, Nixon, that kind of gesture. But he's just had that in his performance for so many years. And so I made those three, and they were done like the night before, and I drove to the Palladium right before it was, while they were sound checking, and there was fans lined up around the block, and I didn't know how to get in. And I learned, from kind of growing up around some professional musicians, if you act like you belong backstage or in like, beyond the security line, just say, I'm here to pick up some credentials for ... And, they parted the seas of the people, of all the fans that were, they were dressed in more black than an ant. It was just all these like gothy looking fans that were out there. And I went in and just said, hey, I've got a delivery for Axl Rose. And they just opened the doors, and I went in there and could hear them sound checking Brownstone, which was so surreal. Like you could hear Duff and Slash and the rest of the guys just like reverberating through the brick wall of the Palladium in Hollywood. And, I handed off the shirts to Brant, and he said, okay, cool. Thank you so much. And like, again, super sweet people working for Axl, like no ego, just really polite and very generous. And they said, I'll show him to Axl and see what he thinks. And, or hopefully he'll like them, and, something. And I just said, okay, cool. And I didn't know if it was going to be now or if it was going to be on tour. All I knew is that I was coming back to the fucking Palladium, and I was going to get in line with those people, and I was going to see the show. And so I ended up taking my kid brother, who's a huge GN'R fan and has the Appetite Cross tattooed on his arm. And, the Mars brothers walked the red carpet with no one giving a shit about us. But, we couldn't have been happier, and go in and buy a couple overpriced cans of PBR and kind of just sit and wait in the middle of the crowd and try to figure out what's going to happen. And then they come out, you wanted the best. Well, they didn't fucking make it.
Right.
Here's what you get comes out. And then they just kick into fucking
It's So Easy.
It's So Easy. And Axl comes out, and he's wearing some shirt with something that looks like a butterfly and a woman or something. And it's not my shirt, but I'm getting buzzed. I don't care. I'm so stoked. And then like midway through the set, he shuffles his shirts about every 3 songs, and he comes out, goes on the side stage, kind of chills, put on a new shirt. And like midway through the set, I'm like, God, like my shirts look pretty rad. Like if he sees them back when he's going over there, like I just got some weird sensation midway around the midpoint of the show. And it was right when it was with Rocket Queen was coming out. And I just got like goosebumps. It was like Jedi shit. It's like if you watch Star Wars enough, like someone was communicating and being like, get ready for the next second of your life and what happens. And Axl comes out and he's doing, his signature snake walk along the stage, but his back is to the crowd. And I can't remember because if it was in the midpoint of the song when he goes off and they're doing the solo and they kind of switch the song, or if it was at the beginning, but he swings wide and he's wearing that neon woman shirt. And I was just like, holy shit, this is so, full circle moment. And I was so stoked. And my brother's like tripping on shrooms. And I'm like, Alex, look, he's wearing my fucking shirt. And he's just like, oh my God. And then I pull out my phone. He's like, oh my God. Oh my God. And to his credit, if you go back in time a couple days, I'm working, like I said, on 3 clients projects, all in my little crammed studio space. And I bring my brother in. I don't tell him that I'm working on these shirts for Axl because I don't want him bugging me. I don't want him like freaking out. And I bring him in and I make the Neon Woman t-shirt, and it's just in grayscale at this point. It's just black and white, and it looks sick. It's like Raiders colors. Like it looks really rad and looks vintage. And I show it to my brother, and he comes in and he's like half baked, and he's like, okay. And I'm like, is this cool? Like, do you think this is cool as is? And he goes, well, who's it for? And I go, it's for Axl Rose. And he's like, whoa. And he goes, dude, if it's for Axl, you should make it the best you can. And I was like, that's like a hippie bumper sticker. Like, if you're making it for someone special, make it the best you can. And so I just like put it in gear, and I made it that red and yellow, and I airbrushed it and made it really sick. And so that was the first shirt that he came out wearing. And so he wears that for, he wears that for Rocket Queen, You Could Be Mine, which is one of my favorite songs, and wears it for another song. And then Duff does Attitude, and Axl leaves the stage. And I'm just like, all right, I'm cooked. This is one of the coolest little creative resume fillers I've ever had. And then he comes out, and it's Civil War, and it's really dark, and they do the intro. And then I see him turn around. Axl's got the big hat on, like looking like the most badass cowboy that ever was. And then he turns around, and he's wearing the bloody peace sign shirt, like back to back. And he wears that for, a couple other songs. And I was just so fucking stoked at that point on just where I was creatively. Like, I mean, I was levitating. At 5'8", I was probably about 6'9" that day. And that was just one of those surreal moments. And I went outside to smoke a cigarette when I smoked, and I got to meet like Fernando from management, and Charles Durer and Molly Terrace, who do work for Global, their merchandise company, and was able to just cultivate a little bit of friendship with them, and got to work with them at some different points. And it was just a really special night. And then I woke up in the morning and texted Brant, just being like, thank you so much, man. Like, that was just such a special thing. I really appreciate everything that you did for me. And I was really glad that Axl obviously liked the shirts. And he said, yeah, we're going to be sending you some more shirts. So it was going to be a job. And that started me kind of being in their rotation as making a lot of shirts or handling the digital production of some of the imagery that Axl's team was coming up with. And that led up all the way until the pandemic. And I vividly remember they were going to South America, and I met up with Brant in like the parking lot in West Hollywood at like one of the federal buildings. And it was this ominous gray day in LA, and it was kind of trickling raining. It was almost like we were handing over like secret stuff. And people on the inside, they know what's going on a little bit more than I think the common man of what's going on. And like,
yeah, I agree.
They didn't know if the tour was going to continue on, or if the pandemic was going to be this weekend thing or a 2-week thing. And
no one did.
No one really did. But Guns N' Roses played the last show, if I can recall, like the last festival show in Mexico that there was. And I got to make a couple shirts for that. And so that was my last time there for, and then the pandemic happens, and then it's just crickets.
Oh, you haven't spoken to them since the pandemic?
No, I worked for them a ton on those subsequent tours once they got going. I was really fortunate. And at that time, during the pandemic, I started to think about starting my own clothing brand. And so I started Adam Mars, it's my name. I was born with it. It was not like a fake name or anything like that.
I was wondering that at first.
Yeah, my dad was Bob Mars. My mom is Patsy Mars.
No relation to Mick.
No, well, that's his. I use that.
Not a Mars bars fortune error.
Yeah, no Bruno Mars, no Mars bars, candy bars, none of that stuff. But there's actually quite a few Marses out there. But yeah, so that's my name. But so I started a clothing brand in that period, and really invested a lot into making shirts specifically for Axl, because I didn't go to undergraduate school and graduate school with the goal of making t-shirts. I want to be a painter that's hanging in the best museums in the world and has shows all over the world. And that's the goal. But having said that, as I mentioned before, just the love and appreciation for being alive while rock and roll is a dominant force in the world, bringing music and art together and getting them on stage, not just like on a t-shirt, but getting them on a platform where some of the most important musicians and artists, I consider Axl and the guys in Guns N' Roses as true artists. Just because they sold millions and millions of records does not mean that they're cheesy or that there's like anything lesser than like something hanging in Gagosian gallery. I mean, Sweet Child of Mine versus a Jeff Koons painting. Like, I'm taking Sweet Child of Mine. I love Jeff Koons, but I'm taking that. But anyway, yeah, during that pandemic, I'm kind of coming up with my clothing brand. And so when things get started again after the pandemic and everyone's kind of getting tour crazy and ready to go, they went on a couple tours, and I was making a lot of stuff for them at the time, and working on hundreds of digital images that were kind of sourced from BDSM stuff or vintage imagery that his team is putting together that I'm color correcting and trying to diversify so that it's not all rectangular, or that it's giving him the best image quality that I can from these found images, while at the same time, if I've got a rad idea, I'm making these shirts for him as well. And so I got to go see them in London, play a couple shows one summer when I was over there. I saw, I think twice, 2 London things. I saw them at Hyde Park, and I saw them out at a football stadium. And then I wasn't working with them so much for a little period of time, and I was okay with it because I was really focused on painting at that time and getting that back in motion in my studio practice. And then they were going to play a couple shows at the Hollywood Bowl, and I thought, I got a couple cool ideas that I wanted to throw their way. And I sent it over to his team, and they greenlit like 3 or 4 or like 4 or 5 of the 6 or 7 ideas that I had. And same thing, drove to the Hollywood Bowl. I've got credentials I got a drop off for Axl Rose, drive up, the long private driveway and hand it over to the team. And
I see you like Wayne and Garth. Is this cool? Is this cool? Do you remember that?
Very much like, don't bother me, kind of thing. I'm like, that's all right. I'm not going to freak out. But yeah, and I showed up with my beautiful girlfriend, Elizabeth, and we had great seats. We were sitting like right behind Jason Sudeikis and like sitting next to former members of Guns N' Roses. And Axl came out, and he wore all the shirts like in succession. Like, he came out wearing a Kelly Cole blank black, like traditional shirt. And shout out to Kelly Cole. He makes a lot of great blanks and has done great work for Axl as well. Super cool guy. But he wore all these shirts. I made him like a Lemmy shirt because I don't know, it was like an anniversary of Lemmy's passing or something like that. And it was in Hollywood where Lemmy lived. And so I made him a Lemmy shirt, and there was a lot of talk about Trump getting a gag order. And so I made this one of a woman with a ball gag in her mouth, and it just said gag order and bold font. And it was Halloween time as well. And I kind of appropriated something from Halloween too, of like this big fucked up pumpkin. And a couple other things, but if I remember correctly, yeah, he wore them all the shirts the whole night. And another one I made of the Hollywood freeway that said like "This way to hell" or something, but it was the green LA freeway thing, or "Hell next exit" or some shit like that. And yeah, that was the last time I worked for him, and that was, I think, the last time they pretty much were on tour.
Yeah, right on. And I was gonna ask, I'm looking at the gag order one right now. At your website, adamars.net, and you can go to see all of Axl's, or even all the artists that you've posted pictures of. And I'm just going through, of course, the Axl one.
Yeah.
And then you brought up the gag order. I would not have thought that would have been the story behind it. I appreciate that. One, I do ask, because you mentioned Lemmy, and that was your idea because it was like an anniversary of his passing, right? Was it also your idea, or possibly Axl's, about his Taylor Hawkins shirt?
That was mine. So I grew up in Laguna Beach, and another weird, bizarre twist of rock and roll fate, I grew up on the coattails of Stone Temple Pilots. So Eric Kretz, the drummer of Stone Temple Pilots, stay with me, guys. There's a lot of little dots we're going to connect. There will be no
That's what I say all the time about myself.
There will be no Milkman references and blah, blah, blah. But so when I was 11 years old, my best friend and kind of my brother, Shane Murphy, his mom, Sherry, started dating a drummer in this band called Mighty Joe Young. And this was Eric Kretz. And from the time I was 11 to about 13, I became kind of like another extended member of the family. I was around them so much that, you know, like I was in all the pictures of the family stuff and outings and whatnot. And we were a family kind of unit. And Eric was probably 10 or 12 years older than us at the time. But Stone Temple Pilots, the new incarnation, or the new name behind Mighty Joe Young, got signed to Atlantic Records. And so right when grunge is in full throttle, I was on the coattails of Stone Temple Pilots. And so I got to go, my first show ever, I was at Universal Amphitheater when I was 13 years old. I was full access backstage. I got to meet Scott Weiland and the DeLeo brothers for the first time. And I got to go on all these crazy shows with them and concerts, you know, here, there, and everywhere. But someone very special from Laguna Beach is also Taylor Hawkins. And so he's born and raised in Laguna, you know, went to Laguna Beach High School, became super famous, at least locally. And, you know, we thought he was a rock god when he was working with Alanis. And right. So Taylor Hawkins and Eric Kretz became friends when Talk Show, one of the offshoot bands of STP, was on tour opening for Foo Fighters when Scott was in jail. And so they became friends. And when I was 18, the summer going into college, the STP was going to play a secret Miller blind date show. If you remember those people out there in YouTube land, they were these special secret shows that if you won through getting a case of Miller Lite or High Life or whatever the fuck they were producing at the time, you had a chance to get a ticket to go to see a show at a small club, and you would get your airfare and your hotel paid for, but you wouldn't know who was going to play. Could have been Limp Bizkit, it could have been fucking Korn, it could have been Bush, it could have been any of those bands that were still relevant in the rock world in 2000. And so SCP got offered, I think it was like $500,000 or $750,000 to go play this show. And Scott was in this position where if he violated his parole, he was going to go to jail. But I think he thought that he was going to go to jail no matter what, because he had flubbed so many times and got popped with heroin, that he was like, well, I'm going to do this big cash grab show, and we're going to go play in Las Vegas at the House of Blues. And then the next day I'm going to go to jail and start my 1-year stint there. But
wow, how rock and roll, man. Oh, he is so missed.
He was so missed. But long story longer, right before that show, it's the summer, and we're at this beach, Thalia, which is like this designated surf beach in Laguna Beach. And Shane and I are walking along the beach, and we see Taylor Hawkins. And Shane is like the most charismatic teenager that I'd ever met. He was like Eddie Furlong, but like half Asian, and like had his long, sick hair, and like was just super confident with talking to anybody, because Scott Weiland was his babysitter when he was a kid. And like he was, you know, he just grew up backstage and meeting all these rock stars. And so we see Taylor Hawkins at the beach, and Shane goes up and is like, hey man, like there's an STP show out in Vegas. You want to cruise? And Taylor's like, yeah, dude, let's go. Like, I'll pick you guys up, and I'll pick you up, and we'll drive out there, and we'll get a sick hotel, and we can all stay together. And so the next couple of days later, I'm at my parents' house, and Taylor Hawkins pulls up in this gray beat up Toyota Corolla, smoking a cig, and you know his hair, you know, looking like Taylor, and he's with one of his best friends, Atticus, and we drive out to Las fucking Vegas at 18 years old, and stay at the Mandalay Bay and go see STP play down at the House of Blues. And it's on YouTube. They filmed it. It's one of the best live shows I've ever seen. Scott was really clean at that time and was in great shape, and vocally he was just insane. And so they did a lot of the recording for the number 4 Down video there. But that's where I met Taylor. And so over the years, I would cross paths with him when I'd see him at the STP shows, or if I'd see him in Laguna. We were by no means like close friends or whatnot, but we were acquaintances. And so when he passed, I remember that night, I was like, oh, just like such a gut punch, especially for the people in Laguna that he was really close to and his family. And they had just bought a house a couple blocks away from my mom. And so I just remember seeing him during the pandemic and saying what up to him down at our local beach. And it was just a really sad thing. And I knew that Axl and Slash and Duff and those guys were friends with him. And so I thought, you know, how can I pay it forward to him? And I just started thinking of something that had, you know, his hawk tattoo, but wasn't his hawk tattoo. And maybe had a little bit more kind of soul to it, and had a little bit more nuanced detail to it. And then that Foo Fighters logo with his initials was my idea. And so I submitted that to Axl's team, and they were down for it right away. And so I made him a couple of those shirts, and he ended up wearing them, I think, as the closing, encore shirt for a long time. And yeah, that was one of the coolest things where, you try to come up with these very special ideas for these musicians to wear. And when it can actually be something that you deeply care about and that affects, people beyond you, and can affect your friends that are mourning for the loss of like a real close buddy.
I
That's
mean,
the story.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll get a little.
No, it's tough. Another like just like with Scott. I mean, Taylor to lose so young as well. It's actually, I mean, I only met him once. I forget if I said the story. It's not as rock and roll as yours. It's silly. It's when I used to work for Sirius XM. I worked
Uh-huh.
for the Catholic channel.
Okay.
I don't know if you could tell by my schnoz.
There's a little disconnect there.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, radio is radio, whatever. But I mean, this was the beginning, middle of my career. I still was fighting to try to get full time or something, and
Mhm.
I remember seeing the Foo Fighters. Everything in Sirius XM is what's called a fishbowl studio, so you can look right in. And I just remember seeing the Foo Fighters being interviewed, and Taylor wasn't there, but that didn't process at that time. All that processed was, I really want to work in rock radio. What is it gonna take? This stinks, like I'm working for the Catholic channel. What's happening?
Yeah.
I'm on my way to the bathroom. Go to the bathroom, the urinal, whatever. And I see out the corner of my eye, because when guys have a rule, face down, not
You
looking anywhere.
you
This
don't
isn't like
go
that
over the
scene in the
ledge.
Ace Ventura. It's not like that. You know that.
Yeah, I
So,
remember that scene very well. And he gets,
but I see,
yeah,
but then I see Taylor in my peripheral start to walk, getting out of a stall.
yeah,
So I decide to wash my hands even longer
yeah.
to time it so we leave at the same time. And that's when I started using a cane because I have
Okay,
a neurological disability.
okay,
So I wear leg braces. I started using a cane. When this is when I started going to the city more because I just didn't have the balance. And it's just interesting when you're, I mean, I'm 41 now, but then, early 30s, late 20s with a cane, people don't know what to make of it. But
sure.
he knew something was wrong. He's like, you first. I'm like,
Yeah,
no, he opens the door for me. I'm like, no, you first. You're Taylor from the Foo Fighters.
yeah.
And I happened to be wearing a shirt that I saw Dave wore in the Times Like These videos, the
Okay,
Sounds, the band
yeah,
The Sounds.
yeah, yeah.
I bought a blue version. He had the
He had the
red.
red version, or the red or
Right.
white.
So I
Yeah,
bought the blue.
yeah.
Uh, I didn't want to be too much of a carbon copy of him. And he noticed it. He's like, "Oh, you're wearing the shirt that Dave wore in the video." He's like, "I don't know, man. They're not that cool." Like, "Are you a fan?" I'm like, "I'm a fan. I'm not a poser. I wouldn't just wear this shirt." And he looked at
Yeah,
me like crazy. Like, "I'm not calling you a poser, kid," kind of thing. But we had like a nice little, 30-second conversation. But just a chance to just I don't know. Sorry, just to bring that up.
yeah, yeah,
Like in the
yeah.
in the littlest moments, he's just was such a kind man. Holding a door open for little old me.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah. And
uh,
also, like, one of the I had mentioned before, I was just a huge, huge music MTV fan, and music was kind of like my big brother before I had, another sibling around. And I know my shit when it comes to, I read the liner, I've read every liner note of every album I've had. I take notes on who won every VMA, every Grammy, like how many millions of albums they had sold. And so when I was around Taylor, this guy was like so passionate about music. Not only is he like playing the drums on the steering wheel for 5 hours on the way out to Vegas, but he's popping in tapes and being just so pumped on what the fuck he's listening to the point when we pull over to get gas, he's buying more tapes of like, like Boston and stuff like this, and just being so just in love with whatever's coming out of those speakers. And he also didn't hold back on, like you mentioned, he sees the shirt, he goes, they're okay. Like
yeah,
I remember he made some comment to me, or I was like, I don't think so. They're kind of all like, he wasn't being polite to a fault. He was just being like totally honest, not a
yeah,
lot of filters on his love for rock and roll. And that's what you get when you have guys like Axl that are friends. Like they're totally probably, I don't know Axl personally, but like, just from what I've gathered, these are different personalities. Like Taylor's a high energy dude, and Axl's a little bit more kind of calculated and chill. But all these musicians just love Taylor because I think that he gave that energy that he was just cultivating inside about the love for their craft right back to them, totally unfiltered and unchecked, and just being like, wow, it's really great to have that love for what I do come back at me from a guy who just is at the top of his craft as well.
And it's a feelings are such a funny thing, but just seeing that, now the story behind the Taylor shirt, and for me as a fan, seeing Axl wear that, uh, I don't know, it kind of meant something.
Yeah.
Like it just meant something. Like, we're all hurting whether you knew him or not. And Axl's acknowledging it, he a loss of somebody he cared about, and it just meant something to me. It's something as you would think silly as a t-shirt, maybe isn't that silly at times. So it's not, at least not from Adam Mars. It's not
Yeah.
just a silly shirt. There's always a meaning behind it, and I want to get a few more meanings before I
Yeah.
get you
Please fire away.
out of here. Do you have a favorite shirt that you've made for Axl?
Jeez. Favorite shirt that I've made for, I mean, the Taylor one, as I just mentioned, has a lot of meaning. So that, and because I came up with that from scratch, that was probably a number one shirt contender. I got to say, just that Neon Woman shirt, because that was the first memory that I have of him wearing it, that I was present when I saw it. A lot of times I make these things for these artists, and I only see them in my studio, and then I see them like the rest of the world, and I see them on YouTube, or I see them on Instagram or Facebook. But to be able to be in the presence of something that was so fresh, I mean, the ink had just dried, and that the obstacle course that it took to get those shirts to the Palladium, the crazy chaotic week before, it just, that shirt is just super special to me. Not for the subject matter or whatnot, but because for whatever reason, that was the first shirt that Axl was like, fuck, I like that shirt. That's a cool shirt. I'm going to wear that shirt. And he continued to wear it throughout that tour. So that put me in rotation for his wardrobe for the tour. And it opened up so many doors that I'm just still so grateful for. Again, as I mentioned, I didn't get into art to make t-shirts, but I would have done that my whole life had I known that I get to work for these great musicians and have that reward at the end of the day. It's just such a special thing.
I hear you, and I can on my end, kind of I can feel a lot of what you're saying, because I didn't get into radio thinking I'd be doing a podcast about Guns N' Roses, but I am so fortunate to be able to connect with fans all over the world. Shout out to Eric from Ohio, who suggested you as a
Yeah,
guest,
thank you, Eric Preacher.
and he sent me this Fargo poster behind me.
Oh, great.
It's just like the kindness of his heart. So I mean, meeting people like that, or getting to interview someone like you who's been just a creative person, passionate, known in the industry, get to work with all these sorts of, amazing artists that are known for what they wear. I mean, Billie
Yeah,
Eilish, that's her. A lot of what makes her her is her style, and to be part of that. And obviously, the same goes for Axl. And if you want to see, because the Neon Girl is the one with the three X's, so just make sure I'm looking at the. So if
yeah,
you want to see all those photos, they're on Adam Mar's website. Is everything? I mean, what is for sale? Like, if I noticed that health
yeah.
shirt that I'm wearing right now is sold out.
In the mid-size medium that you requested, it's sold.
Oh, yeah, I'm a medium. You can tell my size. I'm a little 5'6" Jewish boy.
Okay,
So
yeah, I'm 5'8", 120 pounds wet. So
yeah,
yeah,
me
I
too.
wear a smaller medium as well. But yeah, I have a couple limited edition runs of some of the shirts. I hope to continue to make them available, but for the most part, a lot of these shirts were one-offs. They were custom shirts that were made specifically for the client at the time. So there's not a lot of stuff readily available, but there are chances for people, if you're just encountering me for the first time, to go on my website, adam-mars.com or adammars.net. You'll find it through the clothing links on those sites. You'll be able to get your hands on a couple things that, were shirts that Axl had worn, not the specific original shirt, but an edition of that design.
Oh yeah, no, mine was fresh in the packaging. What did I do with the? Oh, I had the certificate. Let me see.
Yeah, I go the. I'm an artsy fartsy guy. Like I
Yeah, I mean, I was like,
authenticity.
whoa. I've never gotten like a shirt that had, let me hold it up. The certificate of
Yeah,
authenticity. The future. This is one just for the future.
when
Uh,
I make limited edition prints, sometimes in the past I would do these little certificates. So I just thought, oh, it'd be cool. sometimes you just get a shirt in the mail and it's just not enough because you've been getting these shirts and they've got a sticker and they've got, all this other crap that's coming along with the shirt. So
Yeah.
that was my chance to put something else in there, that a little memento.
No, no, I like it. I saw that. I was like, ooh, all right, that's cool. Now I felt like I really got something special. I mean, when you first, hey, let me send you a couple shirts. I was like, whoa, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
When we asked though, where did the hell thing come from? Since I have it.
Well, so that show, okay, so I knew they had this pre Super Bowl warm up show in Miami going on. And I had, okay, let me just wrap my head around this. Okay, this is
Sure.
around February. So my birthday is February 3rd, and the Super Bowl is always going on around my birthday. So I remember I was making some custom shirts. It was probably like the second batch of shirts that I was making for Axl, and I had made some some shirts about this show called The Outsider that I was told that he really liked, which was on HBO. It's based on a Stephen King novel and pretty rad show. But then I was thinking of like, how can I make something that's authentically Florida? Because when I was working for Post Malone, a lot of times I would make things that were city centric. They had a lot of imagery or references to the city that he was going to be wearing the outfit in. And so I thought, let's get something that's kind of Florida based or whatever. And I just thought, the palm tree was something that was interesting, and that it's just going to be super hot down there. And the political climate at the time was really on fire. And I just thought, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to give you a good story for
No,
the dots that I was connecting. I just thought, oh, it'd be kind of sick to have a rad, like a big shirt that had hell on it, almost like a skateboard graphic. And so I just was dicking around, sketching some ideas. And then I just thought, okay, what about like an atom bomb blowing up behind a palm tree, and that image together with hell, the GN'R red and yellow color scheme, just, they looked really cool. And so I made that. I cut that all out by hand stencil and did some airbrush work on it. And yeah, it was my birthday on the 3rd, and I think they wore it on the 4th or something like that. And I remember looking, and he wore like a shit ton of my shirts. And so that was just a really special birthday present of being like, all right, the world's being okay to me right now. No complaints. Axl wore a ton of my shirts. And I went and had, I think, dinner with my mom. It was a good time.
Yeah, have you ever, I mean, again, I understand the politics of it all. Just like want to say, like, have you ever tried to reach out to him directly, or is it always
I
through the
have
management?
I have not. I've been very respectful of knowing that he's a very private guy. He's one of the most
Fair.
notoriously hermetic people that like just went underground for so long, and we didn't know what was going on with him in the pre Chinese democracy era. And his team has just been so kind, and I'm so grateful that just to be included in his arsenal of fashion. He's one of the most iconic fashion people, that we have in the rock lexicon. Those shirts and his, you could turn on the TV in 1989 and he'd be wearing leather pants and like shit that he had taken from Izzy, and then the next day he's wearing like a kilt and a catcher's protector and looking like that's the coolest thing that ever was ever put together, or the Versace stuff. And so the fact that I didn't have to go to fashion school, I didn't have to read Vogue and all this stuff, and somehow I got my way in there, and that I appealed to his sensibilities as a as a human. He just thought that my stuff was cool. That's enough for me. I do have some other GN'R member stories. Again,
Okay.
the VR Velvet Revolver thing. I've been around Scott Weiland quite a few times, not like buddy, but to the point where I knew who he was and he knew who I was. And I did have a really fun conversation at a weenie roast with Matt Sorum in like 2000. This was before Velvet Revolver for him, and when he was back with the Cult. But as you probably know, Matt is like loves to talk, and he's got some good stories and love to shoot the shit. Super cool guy. And I had some like a brief conversation with Gilby when his daughter and my brother's band were playing in downtown LA right before the pandemic, and he was super cool. And then I went to a Camp Freddy show, and I touched Slash as he was walking by me, and I said, "Give us a good show, Slash." And he kind of looked at me like, "I'm fucking Slash. Of course I'm going to give you a good show." But that was a very Wayne's World moment where one of my best friends, Jordan Hellman, who's my partner in crime and rock and roll, is walking right in front of me, and he's about 6 foot something, and he's just like behind me, behind me, behind me, and he steps to the side, and Slash with the hat, the leather jacket is coming towards me, and we're at eye level, and I'm just like, whoa, Matrix, like whoa. But I was hammered at that point. So, and then Duff was right behind us and like gave my friend a high five. I was like, look, yeah. So I do have that overlap, but no Axl stories to share. And I apologize if ever everyone's tuning out right now or wants a refund on it.
No, what? No. Hey, this is free.
Yeah.
So there's no refund. No, I'm just asking out of curiosity
Yeah,
because
I hope so that one day, I could pay it forward and just say thank you as a human being. I'm not like a super, I've met the diehard fans. I'm a big fan of Guns N' Roses. They are my favorite band for what they've taught me about rock and roll, of how they lit that fire that has never extinguished. But I've met the big super fans, the front row people that are super dedicated. As I've said to them, I'm like, we're the same species, but we're a different breed.
I understand that as somebody who
Yeah.
talks to fans on the regular. I mean, I don't know how you can afford it. One, first of all, but
Yeah. They're great. They're like Margot, shout out to Margot and the girls. They showed up at my art show. I told you a little bit, but I had this art show in like Torrance of all places. And like a pack of these diehard, really devoted fans were super sweet. They came and we swapped GN'R stories for like a couple hours, and they stayed the whole time. And it was just rad to meet these people that band has the same effect on them, and that they're so grateful that the band is still around. And I will just say that there's, if you look at the internet over the years, there's been a lot of people that are coming at this band from a, why don't they do this? Or I wish they were like this, or I wish he sounded like this, or I wish they played this. And that's fair. I mean, we all have an a la carte understanding of what we want our reality to be,
mhm.
but just be grateful that they are playing, and that they are not playing, and that they are still out there giving 100% when they're playing. I mean, these guys, rock and roll was not created for people of their age to be doing this stuff. This is
Mhm.
super challenging material to travel, to get warmed up, to do all this stuff that they probably don't understand, that this is like athletic stuff that they're doing to prep to be able to give you a huge chunk of their life to put on a show to hopefully make you happier.
A
So,
3 hour show that they don't need to do.
and Axl, fuck, he is such a pro. I mean, he performs the whole time. He is not locked into the mic, phoning it in. And when he
He's
hits those
not.
notes that he invented, that nobody else in this world can hit, it is worth the price of admission for one fucking bar of vocals, in my opinion. And that's just my opinion. So I hope I can just instill a little bit more faith in that this band is worth your time and money, hopefully, to continue to see and to support, because when they're gone, they're gone. There is no Axl Rose part two coming.
No,
Rock and
there's
roll
not.
is not better off now than it was 10 years ago, and it's not better off than it was 20 years ago.
I know.
So be grateful that these guys are still entertaining us.
I agree with you, and I had said this recently with because there was an article that came out, or a few articles that came out about my interview with Lou Graham,
Uh-huh.
from
Yeah.
Foreigner, and I just asked his opinion, because it was just interesting. Okay, when Foreigner was hot in the '80s, and it's a different kind of rock than when Guns N' Roses came in, and I've always had a chance to ask the other kind of hair metal-y bands about
Sure.
what they thought about. But I'm like, here's a chance to ask this pop rock band vocalist who's about, now thankfully Hall of Famer with
Yeah.
Axl's voice. And he goes to talk about how he can hear he was damaging his voice early on. And that kind of set off a bunch of comments about how he sounds now and all these things. And yes, we all have our opinion. And even like, so like me, I would love to see an acoustic stuff, or maybe different songs that fit his range now. All of that being said, is just playing fantasy baseball or
Yeah,
football.
for sure. And
At the end of the day, I've always say I'm so grateful that they're here, because when I became a fan, like fully in my psyche, and just like, they were broken up. They were
yeah.
already broken up. I thought they would never get back together. I thought I would never see Slash and Axl on stage. And the fact that they've been doing it literally as long as I've been doing this podcast, and I've kind of been along on this ride with the fans as a
Yeah.
fan, I by accident did not. I remember I've said this before. My still current friend, former co-host Ian Scotto, I when he first came to me with this idea about a GNR podcast. I thought that was stupid. I'm like, what? They're my favorite band, but what am I going to talk about
What are we
November
talking
Rain
about?
for an hour? But here we are, 8 years later. That's leading up to the reunion at the Troubadour, and just grateful because that they are still together. And while I voice my frustrations about certain interviews or not getting certain interviews, that's just me taking things personally, and um, it can hurt my perception of the business of just like how certain things are communicated or
Yeah,
whatever. But at the end of the day, I've heard nothing but wonderful stories about all these men, and they all could be looked up to. Yeah, they might have been rough around the edges back in the day, but I think now all of them are like role models.
yeah,
It's it's
and
it's, it's incredible.
yeah,
Like,
that's interesting too because when I was introduced to these guys, they were in their early 20s, and the 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 perception of mental health and all these things right
yeah.
now is so much more heightened. It's people are acutely aware of these things that people are dealing with that may be affecting them in their professional life. And when we first get introduced to Guns N' Roses, it's just like, oh, they're all just crazy.
Right.
Axl's crazy, Slash is this, blah blah blah. And then over time, you get to realize that these guys were kind of fish out of water. They were put in these really bizarre worlds of business and public spectacle, and they probably didn't get to address any of these things that were really fucking them up. And
Mm.
so they become a much more complicated individual with fame, drugs, women, dot, 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 dot. And so it's really cool, as you said, to see them now as adults putting in the work on themselves and putting in their work as individuals and going out there. And it didn't take Oprah to get them together. Like whoever it was, they had to agree that they were going to put differences aside and that they were going to evolve together and continue to offer this gift that they created when they were young and wild and fucked up with this new relationship that they have. And so we get to see them be probably better people, and they're giving us a lot right now. And I don't know, again, I'm not going to say, oh, these guys were saints and you're defending them and cancel culture, this, that, other thing. I'm just coming into it purely as a fan. Like I can look at a Jackson Pollock or a Picasso and appreciate the artwork and not be like, oh, well, he was a piece of shit or that guy was a murderer. Like I can separate those two things, and I'm just coming to it as a fan and someone who appreciates rock and roll and music.
Likewise, and I think that's why we've been getting along today and having this long conversation, because I look at it as a flawed fan. I'm a flawed person, and and I look at these guys. That's what gravitated me towards them, not just in addition to the music, is that they're all like, flawed in ways that I saw myself.
Sure.
And then spoke about people that like with Scott and Taylor who couldn't overcome these demons, and
Yeah.
it's so painful. But we see these guys, the band that's behind you
Yeah.
over your shoulder, right on
And
the
this
Cantor's
this is
Deli.
a specific decorating for this is on brand decorating, and this is for my brand. This is one of my paintings at Iggy Pop. So, but yeah, these guys were very wild.
All right, and so people will still complain about the two other guys there, Steven and Izzy, not being in it. But you know what? They're all alive, man.
Yeah,
And they're all like, they seem like they're happy. And like, yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful I get to have this conversation with you. And everything else is just kind of having fun. If you want to talk about the set list, you want to talk about new music, all of that is fun. It's really not important in the grand landscape of things. But the fact that we have this band that you could see, I'm sure and Slash, they probably were hurting for a long time that they lost their one-time best friend or their friend that they made this, and then to see them smiling on stage together, especially when Axl's wearing one of your shirts, is pretty
yeah,
special and cool. And I can't wait. There are rumors of them touring next year. I don't know where it's going to be. There might be rumors of the overseas. I don't know, in our neck of the woods, but I don't know. I Now with my wife, because you mentioned you went to London to see GNR.
yeah,
She dragged me to London to go see Dave Matthews, even though my son and we just stayed in the hotel room and played with
yeah,
rubber
yeah. That's where I
ducks.
might have been too.
So
But
yeah, so
Dave is great though. He's great. But
no,
yeah,
he is very talented. It's just I've seen him once is enough. Once is
sure,
enough for me. Over 70 is not enough for her. But
okay,
next time they tour GNR, I can't wait to go with my son and pass the torch of this band. That
Yeah,
is just so cool. So, and he's gonna get all these stories from this friggin' podcast that we may not have known. So, and these all these peripheral people that are somehow involved. And Adam, you were one of them. I hope to do this again. I'll extend it because you're so cool to talk to. If you
thank
ever want
you.
to come on
Like,
as a co-host,
okay,
if you ever see a guest I announce, you're like, hey, you know what? I've made shirts for that guy. Maybe
I'll
someone I
be a
never met.
Robin Quivers for the day, maybe.
You could talk more than her. That's fine.
It's all right. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that upcoming tour, but if I still just have one client as a fashion guy, like I'm happy for it to be for Axl. And if it doesn't happen, I'll still be a fan and I'll still be watching your videos and I'll still be at their shows.
As you told me before, and I guess still, it's just again my negative mindset that's been so hard to break out of. Like no one listens, whatever. And before we started recording, you're like, I've been listening to you for years.
Yeah,
I've subscribed. When you asked me to be on the podcast, I was excited, and you saw my face. All of that was just like I wasn't like, oh yeah, of course, of course. I was surprised. So,
yeah.
um, those I appreciate moments like that, and the fact that this is still happening. 481 episodes into this.
And I was born in 1981, so that's another fun coincidence.
Oh, perfect, perfect. And as far as what is to come for the next episode, I don't know. I'm not sure. There's a lot of feelers out there, but you can be just like Eric and just comment whether I specifically asked on a post on social media or not. Say, hey, have you thought about so and so? And
Yeah,
maybe I have, maybe I haven't. And look at that. Eric created an episode out of nowhere.
yeah.
So,
And I
so
and I will just say, in this time frame, we get really preoccupied with volume of likes and views. But if you can kind of scale it down a little bit and think about how many people saw the first Sex Pistols show, how many people saw the first Stooges show, or followed the Stooges, or did these really interesting things where interesting people, not in mass and by the millions or by the hundreds of thousands, but when the thousands or hundreds followed things, and that is special in itself, and that there are some, again, I've been watching this stuff for years. I think I'm okay. I'm a good person. I'm a special guy. And there's a lot of other people that might not be filling up those view counts comparable to some other channel or other garbage or whatever, but it's still worthwhile and it's still informing people and it's still making people happy and probably engaging with like YouTube or Facebook or stuff in a way that is not negative. You know, there's just
I
so many people that are just these newscasters for fucking hate out right now. And that's
I
become the
know.
norm. And now it's just like, just give me like 10 minutes to geek out with the guy from Foreigner or for the guy from Nine Inch Nails or with, something like that. And you're providing that. So thank you.
Thank you. Referring to my Aaron North
Yeah.
interview, which I still get comments on YouTube being like, he's alive. Thanks for
He's
doing that.
alive. I
Just
didn't know.
somebody, I'm lucky. One of the many interviews I've gotten lucky enough to do. You can also send emails. You can at the afdshow at gmail.com if you have a suggestion. Website, afdpod.com. Constantly being updated. Shout out to my buddy Graham out in Scotland that does all my graphics and helps me out with the website. It's just been a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. And knowing that you're listening, Adam, I'll up my game. I'll up my
All
game.
right. Stay positive.
So that does it for this episode of Appetite for Distortion. When will we see the next one? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.
Thanks to the lame ass security, I'm going home.